everyone. We're so glad that you could join us here today on this beautiful evening. I am Sarah Heilman. I'm the Energy Policy Coordinator here at NC Warren. I'm joined by some of our wonderful staff members. Staff, if you could raise your hand or stand up, wave. Round of applause for our staff. Great, and Rita and Elijah are also here, but not in the room with us right now. NC Warren is in its 38th year. We are a nonprofit organization. We're a watchdog of Duke Energy, and we promote climate solutions and justice. This event is part of our Stop Climate Deception campaign. When we say climate deception, we mean the propaganda that everything's peachy in North Carolina, we're on the right track, and there's no changes that need to be made, when in fact, the situation is urgent, but not hopeless, if we can make the right choices and the right changes to get North Carolina on the right track. That's why we're pressing Governor Stein to stop Duke Energy's massive expansion of fossil fuels and experimental failure-prone nuclear plants. This is what scientists say is absolutely essential. To change a massive polluter like Duke Energy could really change the whole game, and we need to do it now in the next 2 to 3 years, not wait until 2050. So we have 2 experts here to share with you more about the urgency of the climate crisis, but also what we see as a better path forward and how we can make it happen. Firstly, we're joined by Dr. Susan Crate. She is a professor emeritus of anthropology at George Mason University, an expert on the Arctic, and she's now local to Chatham, and we've had the great pleasure of getting to know her. And in 2021, she published her book, Once Upon the Permafrost, Knowing Culture and Climate Change in Siberia. We're also joined by Bill Powers, who traveled all the way from San Diego to be here today. He's been NC Warren's expert engineer for over a decade and has over 40 years of experience in energy and environmental engineering. And he's currently our expert witness at a proceeding at the Utilities Commission. So glad you can join us today, Bill. And we'll start off with Dr. Crate. And after both presentations, there will be some time for Q&A as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sarah, and thanks to Jim for inviting me. He told me after I know Jim from probably 38 years ago when NC Warren began. I was not a professor or an anthropologist. I was a singer and storyteller. We have reacquainted ourselves, and he said when he found out about my work, he said he was going to use me for certain things, and I guess this is one of them. So I'm very glad to be here, and I'm very glad to be able to use my expertise to help raise awareness. Probably you're not the people who really need awareness raised, but that's okay. Anyway, all right, so I'll get right down to the point. And I'm going to be reading because I tend to talk a lot if I don't have words in front of me, and I know I'm on a limited time scale. Can everybody see well? Can you see over there the screen? Should I move over a little bit? Okay, we're good. Okay. Anthropogenic climate change spells certain doom to all the various life forms that inhabit the diversity of ecosystems across the lands and waters of our planetary home. Plants and animals, both human and non-human, all have specific adaptations to their ecosystems. Some are more flexible than others. I am an anthropologist. I know about non-human animals and plants, but my specialty is humans, and specifically those humans inhabiting extreme environments like the Arctic. I've worked with and studied one group in particular, Saha, for the last 35 years. Saha keep cows and horses and inhabit the Saha Republic in northeastern Siberia, Russia. Their Turkic ancestors transmigrated from Central Asia. I'm told that there is a laser pointer here, okay. From Central Asia to the shores of Lake Baikal in southern Siberia, and then in the 13th century, in the Genghis Khan period, they followed the Lena River north, and settled in these hayfield areas of northeastern Siberia. Saha I have mainly worked with live along the Belui River in western Saha and are referred to as Belui Saha. Makes sense, doesn't it? Okay. The landscape is taiga forest dotted with alas. Alas are cryogenic lakes surrounded by hayfields. The climate is extreme continental with 100 degrees Celsius temperature change annually. It goes from plus 40 in the summer Celsius to minus 60 Celsius in the winter. That's about 100 degrees Fahrenheit in the summer to about minus 75. Minus 75, minus 60, I mean, you know, really cold. Oops. Just trying to get this up a little higher. I got it, it's fine, I fixed it. All right. Regardless of how foreign such a scale of annual temperature seems to us, Saha have called this place their home for centuries, and to do so, they have adapted in very specific and measured ways. It then follows that any changes in that climate would disrupt Saha's adaptation approaches. This slide shows how the last 53 years of warming has resulted in the Arctic, the brown area at the top, which you might not be able to see so well, but this is brown up here. And according to this scale here, brown means at least 3.5 degrees Celsius, which you know is a lot. That's the temperature change in the Arctic areas. There are multiple examples of how Saha's adaptation is affected by this warming. Let me give you one example that was shared with me by one of my friends in Siberia, Valery. Valery repeated this phrase to me many times over the years that I talked with him. Saha is horses' home. So Saha keep their cows in small barns in the extreme winter, but their horses live outside year-round. And in the winter, Saha horses roam the hay fields in harem groups, and they dig through the snow to eat the kincheri. Now, kincheri is the about 6 inches of hay that grows after the one hay cutting is done in the summer and before the freeze-up. So they're digging down through the snow to get that kincheri and eat it. However, the climate has changed such that the former gradual cooling in the fall that led to a still, quiet, frozen winter is now characterized by temperature fluctuations in the fall, causing freezing and thawing, resulting in an ice layer that covers the kincheri, making it inaccessible, and a great deal of wind in the winter, unheard of before, that makes standing in the fields unbearable to the horses who escape to the forest for shelter. As a result, horses tend to starve, and horse herders, being aware that this is going on, have started to keep their horses near their houses. But they can no longer take advantage of the kincheri because the horses can't access it, which means they need to either purchase hay to feed their horses throughout the winter, or they need to work extra hard in the summer to cut enough hay for their horses. Their neighbors also don't appreciate having the scary stallions near the villages, and we've witnessed this ourselves. They're very scary. Snow as a horse's home is one example of the many expert adaptations Saha have made to thrive in their environment. Their knowledge is deep, and they know about the changes caused by the warming because they are keen observers, and they've adapted to this extreme climatic regime, which is now being broken. Let me share one of many examples of Saha knowing, or their knowledge system. The sound of cold. This was shared with me by Marie. She told me about the sound of cold, and I asked her what she meant. And she said, before we didn't have thermometers or any kind of instruments to know how cold it was, but we knew when it was that cold because it made a sound. And I'm not even going to try to represent the sound. Shook, 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 or something like that. Oh, there it is. Shuru, 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 shuru. That's when they knew it was that cold. There are many, many more examples of Saha adaptation and knowledge waves and how they are challenged today by climate. And I wish I had the time to share them all with you, but I don't. Another issue which is much more visually obvious is the development of thermokarst across the landscape. Thermokarst is the surface level manifestation of thawing permafrost underneath, which can be anywhere from 2 feet to 8 feet down below the ground. Just looking at these pictures, I'm sure you can understand what an impediment this is for people who are herding animals. It is important to know that not all permafrost is the same. The official definition of permafrost is ground that remains below 0 degrees Celsius for 2 or more consecutive years. However, the ground that you're referring to can be anything from solid rock to sand to ice. And here is a map of permafrost that my collaborator, Alexander Fyodorov, who works at the Melnikov Permafrost Institute in Yakutsk, created. This shows that within the Saha Republic alone, there are 54 different types of permafrost. Who would have thunk it? I like to say it's sort of like, have you ever looked at a soil map? It's sort of the same idea. Many, many different kinds. And it makes sense, and it is directly related to differences of soil and rock. But you will also notice from this map, if you look closely and understand, that the green represents ice-filled permafrost, that the areas where Saha raise horses and cattle, the hayfields, which have the elas, the cryogenic lakes surrounded by hayfields, are exactly the areas that are undergoing the most thaw. See, this whole green area here are areas of those elas haylands where Saha keep their animals. Scientists are also able to model past thawing rates and then take those rates and project into the future how it is going to be. And here we're seeing the relevant present and then the thawing permafrost in the pink into the next century. So you can see here's model 1990 to 2000. We see that projected, the thawing here projected into 2040 to 2050, and then here 2090 to 2100. And also notice how far south, this is China, how far south permafrost goes. The next slide is going to have a little bit of a video on it. So this is drone footage that my collaborator Alexander Fyodorov made, and he made this while he was out working with these communities, trying to help them understand how they can preserve the permafrost that's immediately around their houses. And the way to do that, it sounds kind of like the opposite of what you should do, but actually every time it snows, you need to clear away the snow, because the snow actually acts as an insulator of the ground and keeps it warmer. You want it to be exposed to the cold temperatures in the air. You can see what it must be like to try to live with this thermokarst developing across the landscape in your hometown. So notice this household here, okay? See, they've done a good job of protecting their yard. But imagine what it would be like to see this gradually happening around you.
Susie, how long before, like that one you were just showing, before that would melt and that would turn to water, like next to them?
What are you talking
Well, like you can see that area is melting right there.
Yeah.
But the other house had land protected. Is that land really safe for the long term, or is it?
I mean, as long as they continue to remove the snow when it snows, so that the surface of the land can be exposed to the cold.
What are the implications for foundations and that sort of thing?
There really are no foundations. I mean, that sounds strange. Not like we know them. You know, there's posts maybe put down into the ground like a foot, but there's really no need to go much farther than that.
No, we can remember hearing that they would have food storage areas that were down to stay cold.
Oh yes, I'm gonna show you that in a second. Very good. I planted her in the audience. Sorry I'm making so much noise up here. Oh, it's done, okay. All right. So this little clip is from me when I went out with some people who were telling me about how much it had changed. I was interviewing them and they told me about it and they said they'd take me and show me. So the young man, this is a father and son, and the young man in this clip has been out here. This is the direction he goes duck hunting. So he goes across this field all the time. And his father hadn't been out here very much. And it's gonna be very quiet, but at one point, Gwosha, which is the father, breaks into English. And it's kind of cute because people who learn English, most of them learn British English, and so they kind of have a little British accent when they speak. I don't know if you can tell, but he's very proud of his English. He's good.
Urutmanı korktu.
bu canavar Walk'ta köyüşkene. Bu öte kurtup koynet ettik çıktan.
Here's the dad. Lots of mosquitoes.
Bileyim vallahi bu bana.
Urutkanı.
The roof before it was flat. That's what they're telling me. Completely flat. So here we go.
Frost and that has melted. That's why the pearls appear.
Bu emeği
Ulan acaba küçük tane. Ben bunu unuttum. Birkaçına bakacağız. O kadar da bu kadar. Kökene var ya. Nefsi.
Urutkanı bak.
Yeah, so he's saying it used to be flat, completely flat. Now there's a canal here. You can see the trees growing up.
Bütün var kim bir tepek. Alıran o bütün yolu da.
Urutkanı kanı.
O da olan bir çok da var şöyle böyle bir tane. Olan bütün yolu da ya.
Açana onca silda.
Yeah, they're saying maybe in the last 15 years this has happened. So we can understand how the permafrost thawing and the thermokarst developing is a huge impediment to horse and cattle breeding in this part of the world. But the permafrost thawing is also affecting other things like the underground storage. So Belus is their name for these underground store areas. Here's another picture of one. You'll see these they look like a little shack outside of people's houses, but it's basically a door that goes down into a tunnel that goes down into this area that's been cleared out right on the permafrost, where they keep anything they need to keep refrigerated during the hot summer. And those are now failing. Those are now filling with water and failing. So again, just like an inability for the horses to either unable to maximize their adaptation via these ecosystem services, which are no longer functional for them. From 2016 to 2018, I participated as a lead author for a special report for the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change on Ocean and Cryosphere in a Changing Climate. Cryosphere refers to all of the, thank you. Cryosphere refers to all of the frozen parts of the Earth, the glaciers up in the mountains, the ice caps, the permafrost, the cryogenic areas. As an anthropologist with knowledge of cultural adaptation, I worked specifically on the importance of integrating knowledge systems, scientific knowledge, indigenous knowledge, and local knowledge. And this visual was our attempt to represent the co-production of knowledge. So not giving any knowledge system priority, like scientific knowledge, which tends to get priority, but looking at it from the aspect of our ability to co-produce knowledge, to bring together understandings and ways of knowing into a complex whole. I bring this up here because as we contemplate Duke Energy's deception and what it means to our planetary stability, because it is exactly this triad of knowledge sources that I feel we need to tap to put forth our best effort in this fight. We know very clearly that what Duke Energy is trying to do. And some of us have solar, some of us have wind. We understand and we know from our experience, from our own local experience, that the sun, the wind, and the geothermal are the way of our future. And the bottom line is that considering what I've shared today, we all live on permafrost. Because we share one beautiful, rich, vastly diverse, and mysterious planet, and to maintain it for all life, we must fight Duke like our lives depended on it. And you know what I'm going to say next. Because they do. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Susan Craig, for reminding us of the urgency of the climate crisis and how we're all interconnected. I, Elijah Brunson, the climate justice organizer with NC Warren, gets the honor to introduce our next legend of the evening, Mr. Bill Powers. He has over 30 years of experience in the electric power generation with expertise including distributed energy, efficiency programs, and other means of avoiding expense and impacts of central fossil fuel power plants. Bill has worked as a consulting engineer with NC Warren since 2015. And he wrote NC Warren's 2023 report, Moving North Carolina Forward, the Case for Local Solar Plus Storage, which we do have some information on our materials table outside if you would like to grab some on your way out. And from here, I'll pass it on over to Bill Powers.
Well, nice to see all of you here this evening, this afternoon. And first off, I would like to recognize NC Warren as a wonderful nonprofit that speaks truth to power. I always like to work with nonprofits that speak truth to power because it makes my job worth doing. So thank you. Okay. There we go. So, urgency of climate change and how North Carolina can make a difference. I'm going to begin with what I see as basically the solution, which is saturation, solar plus storage. We'll just do a little one-on-one on this, 101 on this to start, since I'll be coming back to this a few times. How many of you have solar? How many of you don't have solar? Okay, that's what, half of you have solar. That's great. How many of you have batteries? Okay, we're gonna keep this 101 short. All right, for the rest of you. Okay, so, I mean, the way it works, this is basically a solar profile during the day. These tan spots are the battery storage. I mean, if you've got battery storage, you're only using a part of this during the day. You've got to do something with the rest of it. It's either going to go to a battery, it's going to go to the grid, or those solar panels are going to shut down. In this diagram, you can see there's enough battery storage so that you can switch to batteries in the evening, early morning, and then you have this period where you're charging during the day. And it is revolutionary. I mean, the fact that we have this tool and that it's reasonably priced is fantastic. We have to use it on a mass scale. And part of that is, I mean, this just happens to be a home with a couple of power walls on the side. even in North Carolina, if you've got 4 of these on a residential house, you're pretty much a 24/7 power plant. Those are now costing $3,000 or $4,000 each. I mean, you can do the math, $9,000, $12,000. Your 24/7 power plant. Again, it's, as the engineer, it's just amazing that we have this tool. This is a larger commercial building storage shed, but same idea, just on a larger scale. So how come not everyone has this already? So let's talk about utility commissions and investor-owned utilities. So almost a century ago, when Franklin Delano Roosevelt was running for president for the first time in 1932, very famous speech he gave in Portland, Oregon, which is well known in this space. And and it was a railing against public utility commissions, public utilities commissions being captured by the investor and utility industry. And he made the point that public utility commissions must fight for the people, and the reality in a century ago and the reality today is they do not do that. And he had a very clear statement to make, that, and this is an amazing thing to say, and I'll explain it in a moment. The Public Utilities Commission is not a mere umpire of some kind. He was differentiating between you as a consumer and the vast, strong investor-owned utility. Their resources are unlimited, and you are small. That it doesn't work for the Utilities Commission to simply be an umpire, as if you were equals. You were definitely not equals. He made the point that the Utilities Commission must act as an agent of the public upon its own initiative, meaning, like Mintz, at the commission the other day, is that you're there to protect the ratepayers. You're not there to simply sit passively and then decide, is the commission right or not? And so, by the way, FDR won that election, and in part because of this action we've been talking about, the governor, is that, standing up for the people. There's a time to do that. There's a time that it works. So, I am in the commission proceeding that's undergoing right now, is kind of planning out what generation assets do we need for the future, and how are we going to do that. And this is a useful graphic because what Duke is saying is, well, our demand is going to explode. We're going to have a tremendous need for more power generation. And part of my testimony in this proceeding as well, this is 2015, this is 2030, these green lines, that's the demand that has actually happened. And that black line dashed is the average. Nothing has really changed over the last 10 years. Duke Carolinas is using about the same amount of power. But this is Duke's projection, the red lines, starting this year. I mean, it's a fantastic jump in demand. At a time when we were all expecting it, we're reducing that demand, more efficient, we got solar, we're doing all the good things, which is actually true. We are doing those things. So, rigging the numbers, actual demand has been flat, Duke's forecast is off the charts, and this is a burning issue right now as we speak today. Because this is so fantastic that even the commission is pushing back on this, going, this can't be right. That's a true statement, it can't be right. And so, what's happening? Why is the demand flat? North Carolina population rising, but per capita electricity usage is falling. People are using less electricity and there are more people. The Carolinas are among the fastest growing states in the nation, but the load is not growing. And so there was a great headline in the New York Times about 2 months ago, which is more bipartisan than beer, opposition to data centers, which is a great title, because it is. I mean, it's United Republicans, MAGA, Progressive Democrats, you name it. Nobody wants these. The tech bros, apparently, but that's about it, no one else. But it's a moving target because this rapidly declining line is how much per capita energy a data center processor needs to operate. And it has dropped it has dropped by, it's 1/100th today what it was 20 years ago. technology changes, it gets faster, more efficient. So the idea that a data center demand is just gonna grow like a mushroom, field of mushrooms, is not accurate. And this is actually something that Jim Warren told me about DeepSeek, which is this new approach to processor operation that is much less energy intensive. Even President Trump got the word, and he did an executive order a few months ago, ratepayer protection pledge, getting the AI industry, the tech bros, to agree voluntarily that they would cover all of their demand with on-site power. And this is Trump, it's not clean power, but it's on-site power, it's gas turbines, diesel, whatever. But it's a recognition that this is a big deal. People do not want, and electricity affordability is a hot issue all over the nation. Remarkably so, given how many issues we have to deal with, but this is the big one. He knows that there's just such a rising tide, growing public resistance to this, that is the pledge for what it's worth. And so in this proceeding that we're in right now, really Duke has put a little, put some solar on the table, some battery storage on the table, and we'll talk about that more in a minute. But really what they're putting on the table to deal with those rising red lines is a large build out of natural gas fired power plants, a large build out of nuclear power plants. So let's go over why gas is not a good idea. How many people think gas is a good idea? No hands, I knew that was gonna happen. Okay. So what's this? This is the Asheville combined cycle plant. NC Warren fought this plant years ago, but it's up and running now. What is this premised on? Fictitious demand growth, which we just looked at, that just tremendous expansion based on data centers. It's also based on the idea that we'll have low and stable natural gas costs for decades. And that was issued before the Strait of Hormuz was closed. But and by the way, we are an exporter of natural gas in the form of liquefied natural gas. Those exports have been booming in the face of the Strait of Hormuz being shut down. It just shows that we're not an island, and we don't have necessarily unlimited gas, and even though we have a lot of gas, we're tied to an international pricing system, which is LNG. So
is LNG sourced from fracking mostly?
most of it is now, yes.
Because no one ever talks about fracking anymore. That was controversial when it first came out, but no one even mentions it now. At least I never hear it mentioned.
It's a perennial winner. It's going to come back. People will be talking about fracking, but you're right. It isn't front and center the way it was.
Because it uses up a lot of fresh water, doesn't it?
Let me ask another question. How many people here support fracking? Okay, yeah, I think everybody, it's bad news. And probably just as bad to be planning a gas expansion future as Duke is proposing. But it's really kind of based on one falsehood, which is, well, we're gonna build combined cycle plants, gas turbines, combustion turbines, and yes, they will burn natural gas initially, but at some point reasonably soon, we will convert the fuel to green hydrogen. How many of you have heard of green hydrogen? Okay, so this, I would characterize, how many of you have heard of Rube Goldberg? All right. Maybe that's all I need to say about green hydrogen. But it is a industry twisting itself into a pretzel to try and sell gas turbines that will burn natural gas. And the energy intensity, the complexity, the new pipelines, the new storage are just, in my professional opinion, an impossible hurdle to use green hydrogen in gas turbines at any level. And so likely what would happen in this case is getting approval to build a new generation of gas turbines on a very distant promise that you may one day use green hydrogen. And that promise, just like the fracking issue you said, has kind of dropped a bit in the press. The whole issue of green hydrogen drops a bit because it's just not a feasible thing. But we have a new generation of gas turbines. And another issue, a big issue, is all over the country, investor-owned utilities are just going gangbusters right now in terms of proposing gas turbines, especially here, nuclear power. transmission lines, everything you can think of. Duke is proposing to spend $63 billion over the next 5 years in North Carolina alone, or in the Carolinas, to just to build out. And again, transmission lines, gas-fired nuclear, none of it is necessary. And these are unproductive resources, but they have a compliant commission, and they have a compliant political environment, which makes it possible. So what's happening now is consumers are pushing back. In fact, that's really the driver is all over the country. This is getting unaffordable. And if this were to continue, it would get just a first step in unaffordability. And so what's happening in numerous jurisdictions, I'm not sure it's happened here yet, to a degree it has, which is why this is happening is that the provision of electricity is a risk-free business. People are going to pay their electric bill, and so it's absolutely risk-free. The analogy I use is U.S. Treasury bonds. People invest in bonds because they're basically risk-free. Your money's safe. You're not going to make a lot of money, but your money is safe. Maybe 4%, 5%. They get 10% guaranteed on everything, and so the money is so good. They're incentivized to gin up Rube Goldberg ideas and then have compliant commissions approve it. So the upside is there's a lot of pushback on this, to have commissions adjust these profit rates to match what it is, which is a risk-free business. So that's a positive. And then also, communities and cities really have more leverage than they think. It's their land, like in Durham. It's Durham's land that these poles and wires are on. Duke, in a way, is a kind of contractor. They've signed franchise agreements with the city with limited terms to use that land to provide electricity. That's also something that communities can do, and there are many municipal utilities in North Carolina, there are many co-ops in North Carolina that are not for profit. That franchise agreement is a point of potential leverage, and you just be aware of pressure points that can be used to try and control this out of control spending. So let's talk nuclear, and give me just 1 minute. North Carolina has a long history with nuclear. It's probably the most, in terms of portion of power provided to the ratepayers, one of the highest concentration of nuclear states in the country. But what is the nuclear history here in North Carolina? NC1 did a nice job investigating how much money had been spent on false starts, early retirements, efforts to build nuclear power in the past, almost $9 billion of wasted money, $25. Huge cost overruns, long delays, which is a hallmark and characteristic of nuclear construction. But another experiment that is just beginning is these nukes were originally permitted for 40 years. All of them are being re-permitted for 80 years. That's a long time for any power plant. And in this case, it's really kind of an experiment. Can they actually last 80 years and still be reliable and safe? So now we have a proposal to basically replicate that fleet of nuclear plants with a whole new set, which would begin coming online, the first one in 2037. And it's really even irrelevant to the data center justification. The data center folks want power in a year. That's how long it takes them to build these data centers, not something 10, 12 years down the road. But again, all of this is being premised on this fictitious demand growth. We know from past experience, most recently the state of Georgia, Vogtle 3 and 4, 2 nuclear units, 2,000 megawatts, $36 billion, 10 years of construction time, which should have been the end. And that was such a disaster. It should have been the end of the story, but it's being used at the beginning of a new story, a success. One of the problems is very inflexible. Once the nukes are up and running at full power, that's where they stay. There is little flexibility to absorb power sources like solar or storage. And then finally, another twist to this are SMRs, small modular reactors, which are being sold as kind of warm and fuzzy nuclear plants, where This is small, you can put it in the garage, you can put it in the and it's good you're laughing because it is total fantasy, but it's being advertised in a serious way, and elected officials are taking it seriously. Go ahead.
When you say inflexible power supply, you're meaning that it's going to generate a certain level of energy regardless of demand, and they have to put it someplace?
That's a great question, and I'll hold the answer for a couple of slides, because we're going to look at the implications of that in a minute. But great question. And so, to solar plus storage, again, to me it's revolutionary. It's actually more cost effective than the other alternatives. It can be built quickly. It's not a nuclear plant that takes a decade. It's not a gas plant that takes a few years. And this is important. There are no asterisks. It's clean solar power. It's not nuclear power with a waste problem or some other hook that you have to accept. And then we'll talk about this a little bit more too, essential resiliency benefit when it's on site and behind the meter. Many of your homes is behind the meter. So especially if you have batteries, you know that if the power goes out on the grid, you're good to go. That is an extraordinary benefit of that source. And this just happens to be kind of an iconic view of what it might look like, with every big box store looking like this, with plenty of storage for the solar that is generated. And this, the NC Warren has been promoting, I think to entice Duke Energy as well, sharing solar where Duke is actually receiving some benefit for putting solar, distributed solar plus battery storage, realizing some benefits, so they're incentivized to be a part of the win-win to have this move forward. In this particular situation, my governor years ago, a Republican governor, Arnold Schwarzenegger, the Terminator, he was really big on distributed solar. And he basically, and this gets back to Governor Stein, I mean, he basically ordered the utilities to do the biggest solar project we'd seen in California at the time on warehouse rooftops. So our biggest solar project in 2009 was warehouse rooftops. And the only negative is that was his last year in office. So this got started, 100 megawatts were built. As soon as that screen door closed behind him, the utilities closed around the next governor, and that program was phased out. But it was a great concept, and it is win-win. So Duke is aware that people want this, solar plus storage. It makes sense, especially on emergency facilities and that type of thing. So they have some projects. This one is, this is right next to a fire station in Charlotte. This is Duke owned, 50 kilowatts of solar, 500 kilowatt hours of storage. That's a lot of storage. And so this is meant, and they needed it when that firehouse lost Duke power and they were on the batteries. This was built in 2015. This is the only project of its type that Duke has built. And it's the right project, but there's been no expansion of it. And let's talk a little bit about microgrids. This is a similar project. It's Duke owned. It's in Hot Springs, North Carolina, up in the mountains. This is a significant size, 2 megawatts, 4.4 megawatt hours of battery storage, fairly robust. Hot Springs, North Carolina. I think that's the Hall River. I'm not sure what that. But anyway, here's the array. And the reason it was built is it has a single transmission line coming off the grid farther to the south. So the idea was, let's put a microgrid in. If we lose that transmission line, we'll be good to go. Almost. And then Hurricane Helene hit. That's the substation that this ties into. And that substation is gone. And so Hot Springs was out of power for 5 days. And I use this as an example now. I support microgrids, but putting your battery storage behind the meter is absolutely critical if you're doing this for resiliency, because they designed this system for one problem, losing that transmission line. They didn't design it if they lost the transmit or the substation. And the irony of this is, so how does Duke sell this failure in the press? And I have to tell this little anecdote. They said, well, all of the homes and businesses around Hot Springs, they were knocked out for 10 days, but Hot Springs was only knocked out for 5 days. So this was a big success. And I would say, if I was knocked out of power for 5 days after I'd just seen all the hullabaloo about the microgrid, I'd have been disappointed. And for me, it's just, if you want maximum resiliency, it's gotta be behind the meter. But, so let's, getting back to NC Warren's current campaign with Governor Stein, declare a climate emergency, displace fossil fuel generation with affordable renewable energy, deploy solar plus storage on critical public facilities like that fire station, and the climate affordability crisis. And if you're gonna build a data center, you bring your own power, and it should be clean power, and it should be solar plus storage power. You should impose no additional burden on other ratepayers in the system. And I think the rest of the nation's starting to listen to NC Warren, because this is being repeated all over the country, that this is what we need to be doing to address this issue.
Bill, can solar supply sufficient energy for a data center?
Depends on the data center, getting back to how much power they actually need. But the short answer is yes, but probably not on site, meaning they can build the solar that they need to build to cover that load. But depending on the size of the site, they may not be able to cover the entire load with on-site solar. They have to spread it out, but they can do it with solar. So getting back to that question about nuclear, and this is a very interesting thing about North Carolina, is for years, Duke, in these arcane proceedings we get in, have said, well, we like solar and storage just like the next person, but it just can't quite do the job. And so we can do some of it, but at a relatively modest level, that's it, because it just can't do any more than that. And one of the early excuses given was the nuclear power, and I'll just point this out. Oops. Duke has actually been using the nuclear. See, this is a spring day in North Carolina. What they're showing here is, this is how much demand there is on the grid, and they're showing that's 12,500 megawatts, and it goes up to about 15,000 megawatts. And this green line is that rock steady and flexible nuclear power. The Duke said, well, we looked at putting in 20,000 megawatts of solar, but this is the only place where we can use the solar, and then we're cutting into the nuclear, so we just have to curtail that solar. And the nuclear power comes first. We don't have anything to do with the solar power, so we just cut it off. Okay, let's look at some battery storage. So they put in way too little battery storage. You go, well, it does help. That's the green. But then we still have to curtail all the solar power. We just can't get it done. And so my testimony was, well, had you thought of putting in enough storage so we can get it all? No, we didn't think of that. We just thought about doing a little bit of it. Those are the kind of debates we have in these proceedings, which is, on one level they're ridiculous. But the way it works is, most people are not energy engineers. Most people get maybe one layer of the onion, 2 layers of the onion, say, you lost me, gone too far. Tell me you don't have enough storage, they do or they don't. But in reality, and it's like many of you that work in your particular professions, that somebody writes a 300-page paper, but you can pick up on page 1 some assumptions that they have made, which is wrong, and then they write a 300-page report to back it up. That's what we look at a lot in this business. Is, well, if it's got 300 pages backing it up, it's got to be good. No, it's just based on a flawed initial assumption. So we're at the end. NC Warren appeals to Governor Stein. I think I'm missing a word here, but use this power build out to set the state on the right path, no new gas, no new nuclear. The data centers that they come should be self-supplied with their own on-site clean power, and that solar plus storage is the fastest, cheapest, and fairest way for North Carolina to phase out fossil fuels and avoid a new generation of nuclear power. I agree with that 100%, and that's definitely the way to go. So thank you for your time.
So, pretty interesting. My name's Jim Warren. Thank you again for being here. Quick little story. You can understand after this presentation why Duke Energy and the state regulators do not want to debate Bill Powers, especially not with anybody listening. And in fact, they have blocked at various times in the last 11 years we've been working with Bill, they have at times blocked him from being able to formally be involved in the proceeding, and they did that again this time. And it's just, the system is just so very rigged. They just arrange it where they do not have to answer questions and be subject to debate in any sort of meaningful way.